guest speaker today is Ruth Tiffany, who needs no introduction, but there are probably a few members here who are new and maybe don't know Ruth. Ruth is a master consulting rosarian. She's been growing roses for decades. She started, I think, up in Oregon. She moved to San Diego, has a small property in San Carlos, but she has, what she admits to 700, but I think if you counted them, there's probably a lot more. She has a great passion for roses. If you spend any time with her, you'll see the passion in her. If you ever get the chance to go out to her garden, you really should take the opportunity. So, here's Ruth.
Thank you. Okay. So one of the things that I asked y'all to do was to bring roses. I'm going to try and see if this works. Can you hear me through this? Is this?
Yes.
Is it okay? I asked you to bring roses. Oh, how am I going to do that? Okay. So you did. A lot of you brought roses, so that's great. But we might need just a little bit more light if you're going to be able to read the names, because I'm going to be passing these around. I want you to do something very specific when you get the rose. When it comes to you, I want you to close your eyes and smell first. Do not look at the name. Close your eyes and smell first. See if you can identify or put a word to the scent that you're smelling, because there may be varied scents. Then look at the name and then go from there. But I'm expecting that there's not going to be one absolutely overwhelming one, because there's so many overwhelming ones. But this gives you a great chance to see and smell a lot of different roses. So I'm going to start here, go this way, back, 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 back. When it gets to you, would you put it over there? When it gets to you, would you put it over there, then it will go up, 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 up. And when it gets up here, we just put it back on the table. That way we will be able to, get through the roses while you can still, have a chance to hear some of the stuff that I'm talking about. So the scent in roses, the scent in flowers is very signal specific. So it's really there for the pollinators and not for the humans. But luckily, we get to live in the same world as all the pollinators that are there for our roses, so we get to smell them also. And I think that's really important. And it is a fragrance. There's a story about a speaker at an American Rose Society convention who was talking about a specific, very fragrant rose, and somebody raised their hand. Somebody raised their hand and said, "And what is the odor of that rose?" Because there are different names placed on rose odors, and the speaker said, "Excuse me, ma'am. Roses do not have odors. Garbage cans have odors. Roses have fragrance." So that is great. And while the roses are very appealing to humans, we should remember that they were designed in the world to live with us for pollinators and not for us. So stop and smell the roses. This is one place where I sometimes talk about how I got started growing roses. When my son was in high school, he was making very poor choices, and I felt very incompetent as a mother for those choices that he was making. And a friend of mine started bringing American Rose Society magazines to work and saying, "Why don't you try roses? I'm sure you could get really good at that." And they don't talk back, and they don't, teach school or do any of those other things. So I did, and I started buying roses, and I was gardening at night because I was commuting too, and I was gardening under lights. It was like wonderful. I could be good at this. So that was my first really good-sized garden in Northern California. And then I moved to Oregon, and I had a really big garden there, and that was a really hard garden to leave. It was like almost a third of an acre, and I had researched all kinds of flowering shrubs and plants besides roses, and I had an upper garden and a lower garden, an aspen grove, and it was beautiful. But God didn't want me to stay there. And so I followed my partner and we came to San Diego. And unfortunately, there was only little teeny lots for very, very expensive prices. And they were all, San Diego, it's a city of mesas and plateaus and canyons. And I knew I couldn't garden in a canyon. So trying to find a flat lot was really a challenge. But I did. It's small and it's a busy corner. In fact, my realtor took me in the backyard and said, "Can you hear that?" to make sure to know that there was a good amount of traffic going by. But it actually has been a godsend because I get to enjoy all the roses on that busy corner, and so does everybody that drives by or walks by. So that is, and I really, really believe that it has enhanced my mental health greatly. Through 2 knee replacements, breast cancer, and any number of family crises, I know that I can always go out there, and even if I'm upset and very, very frustrated or angry or very, very sad, I know that working in the garden with my hands is going to help heal those things in my head. And it works for you too. So, we tend to have a romance with roses a lot of the time. Well, how come they don't smell like they used to? My memory of when I was a child and I remember roses is they were wonderful. And now I go and I stick my nose in a rose and it doesn't smell. But there's a lot of things that change over time. There are some theories that roses mutate some, but I think probably the bigger possibility is that our smellers do wear out after a while. So every rose has its own scent, and every smeller has their own nose, right? So evaluating rose scents is kind of like wine tasting, and you know that there are thousands and thousands of opinions about what wine tastes like. So there are different opinions about what roses smell like. Like men and women are different. I mean, really, men will often pick up apple in a rose, and more often than women, and women will often pick up the fruit scents. The location of the rose, where it's grown, even in your garden, you can move it from one place to another, and the scent might change over time. If it gets more sunlight, more shade, more water in one area, the time of the day, even the time of the year, and the state of your mind has something to do with what you're smelling. So if you go into the garden and have a really foul mood, those roses are not going to smell as good as if you go into the garden with an open mind and a happy look and feel like you're going to get something good out of it. One of the things that we know is that we early imprint as children what smells are like. And so if somebody were to come up to you and say, "Close your eyes," and they would hold a marigold under your nose, would you have a memory? If they held a lily under your nose, would you have a memory of that kind of scent as a child? Would you be able to pick it up and remember it? Those are really things that they stay with us because the memory of scent is way stronger a lot of times than the memory of things that we've seen. Because, and we'll talk more about that as we go along. So one of the things that we deal with in the world that we live in is a lot of florist roses. And now florist roses are actually, I think they're really kind of strange creatures. I'm not sure exactly what their purpose is other than, making a lot of money for the companies. And so they have these really long stems. In fact, I have seen florist roses with stems, I kid you not, that long. So here's a rose, and the stem is all the way down to the floor. And I'm going, that's just wrong. They also have really long, the whole bloom is really long, and the space between the bloom and the first set of leaves is extraordinarily long. So they sort of look like ostriches, So the long bud, they have a vase life. They have a vase life of 14 to 20 days. Isn't that just amazing? Except that so do artichokes. I mean, seriously, to me, that is kind of what they look like because And the whole idea of Florist roses is that they can produce them mostly in a lot of them in South Africa, a lot of them in South America, some in Israel, and they produce them over a very short period of time. Hopefully not with child labor, but over a very short period of time. And these roses are actually tortured. I believe they're tortured. I'm pretty sure, I'm almost positive that they cry. I believe that they are tortured because they're in greenhouses and they're in little pots, and they actually can't go anywhere but up a long string that they're tied to, and then they cut them, and then they send them all the way around the world, and you're supposed to put them in a vase, and they never open. Right? They never open. Not only that is they never have a scent. And that's the hardest thing, because we spend millions of dollars every year on florist roses, and we want to give roses to our family and friends, and we want that to express the beauty of the rose, but there's a big thing missing, and that's scent. So I do think they cry some. Because the soul of a rose is her fragrance. That's really what I think, because the first time you see a rose, you stick your nose in it, right? This is what you want to do. You want to keep putting your nose in the rose. Now this person has labeled a bunch of them, so pass this one around too. So it's really in the genes. Genetically, fragrance is always linked to certain other characteristics that are not very positive all the time. A weak peduncle, let me tell you what a peduncle is. The peduncle is the part of the rose that's right here, and it's what holds it up. This is a bit weak right here, and you'll also notice as you look at some of these David Austin roses that we have, that they hang their heads. And that's considered a weak peduncle. So the rose isn't standing up, the head isn't standing up straight, and we think of that as a negative thing, but it's just, it's one of the characteristics of fragrant roses is that that's one of the genetics that goes along with it. Poor color retention, so they're not always going to be able to hold their color really well when they're fragrant, and they're not always as clear and bright as a rose that is, as a rose from the florist. And they have a softer substance that tends to be related to the petals. The petals tend to be thinner. And there are scent areas in the petals that release the oils in the petals, and the petals have to be thinner in order for those scent areas to really be effective. And when you have a rose with really thick petals, and some of them do have really thick petals, you will sometimes find that rose isn't very fragrant, because it needs to have thinner petals in order to hold on to those fragrant areas. And it doesn't have as long a vase life if it's really fragrant. It doesn't last as long in a vase. It certainly isn't a 14-day rose. And the other thing that's really kind of sad is that it has more susceptibility to disease. The genes are just connected to each other, and there's nothing that we can do about it. They just live together, and that's the same. So there is some research out there about this RHNUDX1 that I found, and it supposedly is going to be something where we can put more scent into roses. But I only found that in one article, so I don't think anybody's really working on that anymore, which is really too bad. What is in the smell? Roses are gifted with a lot of different smells. They don't have just one. We think of the rose scent as kind of like a damask scent, and that is a very common scent, and one that we really think of as damask. And is there This one, when it comes around, probably will have a certain amount of damask scent because this is an old garden rose. And a lot of the other ones of these are David Austin's or hybrid teas, and so they're all gonna have a little bit of a different scent. But the damask rose, now Mr. Lincoln is one of the, and Tiffany, and Papa Mayland, and Crimson Glory, and Alex Red. How many of you have grown any of these? And you remember them as being fragrant? For the most part. Yes, exactly. So damask is a very common fragrance that we look for. But licorice is another one that we'll find sometimes in roses. Julia Child is one, but what's another rose that some of you can think of that might have some licorice scent in it to you? Yes. Well, there you go. See, that even has it in the name, right? White licorice definitely has, it's a kind of a pale yellow rose, and it's always one of those ones that's really fragrant in the garden. Fresh cut apples. I don't know that I actually, but I'm not a guy. So are any of you guys, can you smell apples in Playboy? No, I don't know. I haven't. I think this one is Friticeo. It doesn't have a label on it, but I'm pretty sure that's Friticeo. Whoops. So fresh cut apples, fruit, lots of fruit. Sweet Juliet, Jude the Obscure, those are both David Austin roses. Fragrant Plum, Just Joey, different kinds of fruit scents. Specifically then, citrus has, there's Radiant Perfume, Sutter's Gold. Linda, you still grow Sutter's Gold, right? Yeah. And some of these roses you can't find anymore, but some of them are still out there. Honey. Now, I don't know Heritage. Is Heritage a David Austin? No. Does anybody know a rose that smells like honey to them?
Honey perfume.
There you go. There you go. So there's some honey right there. Spice. There's a lot of roses that have a scent of spice in them. Now, this is just a small number, but Double Delight is definitely a rose that has some spice scent to it, and we probably all really felt like that rose was really, really a wonderful rose, a wonderful scent. One of the other scents that we smell a lot, especially in the David Austin roses, and there are a few of them over here, I think. Yes, there's a few of them in here, is myrrh. Myrrh is a very unusual scent, and when people have never smelled it before, they're going, oh, that's interesting, that's different, that's strange. It's not, it's pleasant, it's a very nice scent, but it's not something you expect coming out of a rose. It's definitely myrrh. One of the ones that I have that has a good amount of myrrh in it is Woolerton Old Hall. That's a David Austin rose. And there may be some of these along the way that do have a myrrh scent. Then there's cloves. Sometimes there's a scent of cloves. I don't get much scent out of a single rose like Jamie Best, but apparently some people do feel like that one has clove. Notice it tends to go with purple roses. Now, Grandma's Cold Cream, I don't grow Sugar Moon, but I know there's a lot of other roses besides Sugar Moon that have a scent of your grandmother's cold cream, that you could close your eyes and remember when your grandma was putting on all of her makeup and her jewelry and everything, and you were sitting on the floor right next to her watching her do that, and then you got that little scent of what she was putting on that came wafting down to you. That is a very strong memory, and that would be cold cream. Nasturtium, I couldn't find any rose. It's referred to a lot, but I'm not familiar with that scent because I don't grow them. Does anybody think there's roses that smell like nasturtium? We'll go on. Musk. Definitely musk, especially some of the older garden roses. They will carry kind of a musky scent that is very distinctive. Then there's violet, orris root, violet. And then there's tea. Now, tea is a really complex. It's a really complex smell. You've all heard of tea roses, and you think, well, how can a rose really smell like tea? And it does. It's kind of hard to describe. It's kind of like a combination of spice and nutmeg and fruit all together. Sometimes you'll get that out of tea, and they're suggesting a couple more David Austins and a couple of old garden roses. Those are all would be in the tea scent area. And then raspberry, again, that would be a fruit, and the raspberry would be like Wednesday Wood or Jubilee Celebration. Again, you know, you've got to close your eyes to really work on some of these scents, but they have been identified by a lot of special noses. The cosmetic company, how do you say that? Shiseido? Japanese company did a lot of research on different kinds of scents in roses, and these are some of the roses that they came up with as having fruity. I don't know how a rose can have a blue scent, so I'm not sure what that means. But spicy, myrrh, tea, damask, and modern and damask classic are all roses that. That's the first one.
Yeah,
All
that was the
right.
first one.
That all have a lot of different scents. So, you know, you can see that there's been a lot of research by a lot of different, I mean, this is a big fragrance company, and they've done a lot of research on the different roses and the different scents that they have. But sometimes we just still have to ask, especially when we walk into somebody's garden and we think, oh, this is just the most beautiful garden, and we put her in, as it has happened many times in the last 2 days in my garden, they put their nose into a rose, and they say it doesn't have any scent. What happened? Where did the scent go? And so I need to we need to make sure we all remember that fragrance is a recessive gene. And you know, if you go into genetics and you look at what recessive means, it means that in order for something to come away with that, an offspring to come away with scent, both of the parents have to have it. And that doesn't always happen. So both of the parents, not only do they have to have it, but that even when they both have it, it's still not a guarantee that the rose is fragrant, because roses have such a wide variety of scents and such an amazing combination of scents that, you know, I mean, if there's one that has a lot of tea and one that has some licorice and they all come together, it might not smell anything at all like the parents. Genetically, as I said, fragrance is linked to the weak peduncle, the poor color retention, the soft substance, the poor vase life, and disease susceptibility. So why in the world would we grow fragrant roses when we have to deal with all this stuff? Oh, because it's so wonderful to have fragrant roses. That's why. So we do it anyway, because we love the fragrance, because it speaks to something in us that is very, very important. So it speaks to us. It speaks to our hearts. It speaks to our souls. The scent of roses. And when we can't find it in the flowers that we grow in our garden, we can go searching for it everywhere else. We can go searching for it in perfumes and absolute oil. Can you imagine 180 pounds of rose petals? I mean, okay, you know, some of you picked up 50-pound bags of BioStart, right? So think about what 180 pounds of rose petals would be. I mean, that's huge. That's why a lot of cosmetic companies, they use chemicals. They don't all get roses to make the rose scents that they make, because it's a very, very expensive thing. In fact, some countries many years ago, their whole monetary system was based on how many containers of rose oil did they have in their vaults. You know, so it is a rose oil. Rose oil has been used medicinally in ancient Chinese times. medieval times, for skincare, for dry and sensitive and aging skin. Rose scent has been shown in some research to aid people's memory, to be a memory enhancer. So in a German study, people were spritzed with rose scent during a memory exercise. And then they were spritzed again. I love that. Spritz me with rose scent anytime you want. They were spritzed again while they were sleeping. And then they were given the test again, and they had 13% better recall than the people who weren't spritzed with rose scent. So isn't that wonderful? And it's been associated with religion. I mean, you know, Madonna and the rose has always been connected for many, many centuries. Again, we have to thank David Austin for working on some of this stuff, because he made it a big focus of his breeding and hybridizing program way back many, many decades ago. He's not with us anymore, but many decades ago, he started taking old garden roses and putting together with modern roses, finding a way to make those recessives talk to each other over and over again, and he came up with Evelyn, which is a very fragrant rose, Crabtree, and Evelyn has decided to make a perfume out of it too. So he did a lot for the world of rose scent, and our hybridizers continue to do that. Now, rose scent is a really interesting, oh, you know this joke, right? Groucho Marx said, "My dog injured his nose." What's the answer to that? Well, how does he smell? And what's the answer to that?
Like a dog.
Terrible. That's right. So smelling, but do know that smelling can be trained. In fact, David Austin had a nose that worked for him named David Marriott, and he was the nose for David Austin roses for a long time. And perfume companies use noses. A person who's been trained, who has figured out a way, who has trained themselves or has figured out a way to be trained to be able to smell many different scents. I mean, where do they get some of those interesting scents like licorice or some of the others, because their noses are very specialized. So smelling can be trained, and the odor of the rose depends on many things: the way you do it, and how you do it, and when you do it. And it's like, how do you smell a rose? Well, you don't want to do it over this last weekend when it was really hot and windy at my house, because all the little rose scent places on the petals that would produce that would release the oils did that really early in the day before the wind came up and the sun came out and just dried all that rose oil on the roses completely. So many of the roses that were very fragrant early in the morning or the day before were not very fragrant. People would come to me and say, "Where's your fragrant roses?" So I took some people over here and I said, "Try this one." And then an hour later, I took some other people over to that one, and it was not fragrant anymore. Because the wind and the hot sun pulled all those oils out, and you have to wait another day. It'll come back the next day, but for that day, it's not going to be very scented. Usually a rose needs to be 1/3 to 1/2 open. If it's open too much, most of the time, unless it's an old garden rose, if it's open too much, it's already, most of the oil has dissipated. And I think this is really interesting. You know, the human nose, our olfactory senses are so heavily related to everything that happens in our brain. But one of the things one of the research items I found was that our noses really never get tired of a rose scent. Like, you know, you can get really tired of other scents. In fact, sometimes even dangerously tired and actually sick. Gasoline, for example, could be, you know, overwhelming and health threatening. But apparently, rose scent is so pleasing to the olfactory senses of our bodies that we never get too much of it. We can't really get too much of it. But one of the things that does happen to us is that over time, we lose some of the ability to smell the roses. And part of that's because what happens in our nose, our noses lose some of the cilia that carry the scent way back into the very back far reaches of the nose. And if you don't have that, then it can't get carried back, so you can't you can't smell it very much. And we tend to be such busy people. We use our hands and our eyes and so much more than we use our nose. In fact, in some trials of scent, they use blind judges because they feel like that sometimes they can be better capable of smelling something because they're not using the other senses. And so we get so busy using our other senses that oftentimes we don't think so much about using our nose. But our nose never stops trying to find the very best scents that we can find. And your scents in that you smell are totally connected to your memories. So that's why I'm saying that you might all of a sudden smell that cold cream smell from somewhere, and it totally takes you back to sitting on the floor watching your grandmother put on makeup, because the nose is connected to the limbic part of the brain that totally remembers everything. So that's kind of I think that's very cool. Yeah, I totally agree with that. Although I do think that the shoes are important too. And I love this quote. The fragrance of the sweetest rose is beyond any flower scent. It's irresistible and enthralling, and you cannot leave it. I've never doubted that the rose has some compelling quality not shared by other flowers. I don't know whether it comes from some inherent witchery of the plant, but it certainly exists. I think that roses know exactly what they're doing when they smell so wonderful for us. And the slightest hint of a perfume can often trigger memories from childhood. And let's explore for a minute how those memories are directly connected to your past. Have you ever picked up a newborn baby and smell, and it immediately takes you back to your own children and the memories that you have of what they smelled like when they were little babies? That is a very powerful scent memory, or some lotion or some other thing that you smell that takes you back to something that you remember. It is one of the most powerful sensations that we have, and that is the sense of smell. And I already told you that it's directly connected to a part of the brain that's the limbic system for memory. Now, one of the things that happens for many of us is that we can't have scent all year long because our roses, well, in California we can. But like, say if you lived in Milwaukee, you could only have rose scent around you for a few weeks to a couple of months. But there always is perfume. And we can always find rose perfumes. In fact, one of the things that I have done over the years is collect a lot of different kinds of perfumes, mostly rose, although I did have a peach period, and I did have a violet period. But the fun thing of collecting rose scents is that they're all very different, just like roses. And they tend to last really well in a bottle, but roses don't last really well. So someday somebody's going to come into my house, my kids or somebody, and they're going to go, oh my God, what do we do with all these bottles of rose perfume? Because I really do love to collect rose perfume. What's a rose perfume that you remember from your childhood? Anybody have a name? Anybody remember that maybe smelled like roses or something? How about well, which one?
what was it called?
Tuberose? Tuberose? Wind Song. Does anybody remember Wind Song? That's a really, oh, you have to be really as old as I am to remember Wind Song. That one definitely had rose scent. What are some other old ones?
Heaven Sent.
Yeah, Heaven Sent. Yes, that was an old perfume that had a lot of Yardley. Does anybody remember Yardley? That was another scent. So we remember those names of those old rose scents that we don't have anymore, but we do remember them from way past long ago. So let me tell you about a rose scent event that my daughter and I did a number of years ago in Russian River. We went to this garden and we made rose scent. It was just the most fun thing. It took all, we went and cut the roses, and I think they were autumn damask. I think that was the rose that they were growing at about that time in Healdsburg. And they put them in these big jugs, and they heated them up. They fired them, and the first water came off, which is the first scent from the roses, and they put them in little containers, so we got to buy some and take them home. It was just a really fun time of making rose scent. It was a great experience. So I was going to tell you a little bit about what the American Rose Society did many years ago, and other places in the world too, to try and promote the idea of roses with fragrance. And there's a number of different awards that have been given over the years related to fragrance. The Gamble Award is the one from the United States, but in England and Belfast and other countries, they also had rose awards that had to do with scents, and that's really important, because then the hybridizers who were able to hybridize roses with scents were recognized for the things that they could do. But one of the things that we have to be aware of when we're looking for roses, this is the best way to find a scented rose, what we're doing right now. Because the catalogs will often say a rose is fragrant when it isn't very much. And when they say no fragrant, when they say no fragrance, there really is none. When they say little, there usually is none. When they say moderate, there may be a small amount. And when they say heavy, you gotta hope that one's true. But sometimes the catalogs are very misleading. So if you can go and look for the fragrance awards, the ones that have won the McFarland, the ones that have won the ones in England, or in any of the other countries, and you see what those lists, see the names on those lists, you'll know that a large group of people have smelled those roses and have decided that they were really fragrant, and they were actually awarded fragrance awards. You know, we've talked a lot about rose shows and how we take our roses to the show. Linda did a wonderful thing for us to tell us about all the points that an exhibition rose has. But you know, there's no points in the scoring system for roses that is related to fragrance. There is usually a fragrance award at each rose show, but it's a separate award from the 100 points that you can get for any exhibition rose. And that's because it's just a lot more difficult to define something like fragrance than it is to define something like the actual color of the rose, or the strength of the rose, or the number of petals. So it's a lot more difficult to judge a rose for fragrance than it is to judge a rose for beauty. And so it's nice that we have all these awards that different hybridizers have received over the years to help us figure out which roses are fragrant. This is the kind of thing that you would see in many of the catalogs. And it says right there where it says fragrance, strong, under perfume delight. And that one is strong. And Pope John Paul is strong. I can't remember, it's been a long time since I've grown lasting love. Is that one?
It's strong.
It's strong? See?
It's my favorite.
And Neptune, who grows Neptune? Would you call it strong?
Yes.
Wonderful, wonderful. So in that category, the fragrance, moderate to strong, fragrant class is often going to show those roses. So the roses that have the most scents are often more of the old garden roses. The roses that have moderate there are definitely a lot of hybrid teas that have some pretty good scent. But sometimes there are hybrid teas, floribundus, polyanthus, and miniatures and mini floras that have no scent at all. We just have to love them for what they are, but we won't be able to get any fragrance out of them.
Where would you consider the double delight?
Double Delight's a hybrid tea.
So the third one.
Yes,
Even
right.
though it has a very strong sense.
Yes, there are definitely hybrid teas. In fact, the ones I was showing you before, all of those are hybrid teas. So there's definitely hybrid teas that have wonderful fragrance. Firefighter is one that we have seen a lot. Are you having fun with the scent? Isn't this great? It's just it's so much fun to smell all these roses, isn't it? So here are some more award-winning roses. The Gamble Award or some of the other awards have gone to some of these roses. So if you don't have any of them, you can look for some of these, or I hope you're writing down a few of the ones you're passing around, or come back up to the table later and write the names down, because that is the best way to find fragrant roses for your garden, is to smell them before you buy them. A few more to add to this list are Double Delight, obviously. Fragrant Cloud, Sun Sprite is sometimes added to that list. Royal Amethyst, Valencia. Some of these roses you can't find them very well anymore. Electron, Angel Face, sometimes that one is fragrant. Apricot Nectar. Cherish, Intrigue, America. Breathtaking rose, unfurl your beautiful petals, unleash your intoxicating fragrance, and melt the heart of the world. I do believe that we can have a much more wonderful time in this world with fragrant roses. Those are all repeats, right? That they've all been around again. Okay. The little purple one has it. Oh, thank you. This is another David Austin rose, Lady Emma Hamilton. So look at the different pear, grape, citrus. Is that cool? Just to find that's what the noses who do these kinds of things have found in that rose. And then there's Jubilee Celebration. Those are the fragrances in that one. And Mr. Lincoln. I don't know, a melon. I'm not sure melon. That one, melon, But remember, it's always in the nose of the smeller. It's not always that we're all going to agree about the scent that we're smelling. I think the Generous Gardener was up here. I think we had one of those. Yes, we did. Madame Alfred Carrière is a noisette. It's a noisette. I'm pretty sure that's true. And that's an old garden rose, and it's been around for a good long while, and it's got a really, really nice musk fragrance. And honey perfume. John mentioned that one, right? And Louise Odeur is a old garden rose. I can't remember which class that it's in. And it's also got a very, very nice fragrance. Fragrant Cloud is a hybrid tea. Fragrant Cloud was hybridized, oh gosh, it's been many decades. It's not a particularly disease-resistant rose, but it is very fragrant. And it is a hybrid tea. Souvenir de la Malmaison. Does anybody grow that rose? In the past. In the past. You've got it, huh? It is fragrant, isn't it? Yes, it is very nice. It's another old garden rose. So, the whole idea is that you smell the roses, not just look at them. so that the roses can come and enjoy being with you. So of the ones that we've passed out tonight, what are some of the ones you thought were the most fragrant?
Neil Diamond.
Strawberry Hill.
Parfait.
Which one?
Parfait. It was double pastel, yellow and pink stripe.
Was that bouquet parfait? Did somebody bring bouquet parfait?
Was it pop art?
It was pop art. It was pop art.
Pop art?
Maybe that was me not reading it right.
Well, we are a little bit in the dark here. What are some of the other ones that you think that smell so good you would like to get? Cornelia, the hybrid musk. Okay, so on the one I brought, and I think the ones Kathy brought, she listed where you can find them. Because sometimes you have to do a little search when you're going for some of these old garden roses. In fact, I just looked before I came where you can get Yolanda d'Argons, which is a very fragrant pink that is one of the ones that was going around. And you can get that at Rose Valley Roses.
Palantine also.
Oh, Palantine carries it also. So doing searches for where you can find these roses is what you want to do when you find some that are very, very fragrant. It really makes a difference. What are some of the other ones that you passed around that you think you'd like to purchase yourself for fragrance? Because that's the whole idea, is that you would go and get some more fragrant roses, not that you just sit and listen to me talk. So what are some of these roses that you want to get? Yes.
What was the rose that was the myrrh? Aroma.
It was Ambridge Rose. It was in my.
Ambridge Rose, I think, has myrrh in it, and it's in one of these. It's in one of these, I think.
That's the way the catalog describes it.
And I have it. I think myrrh is in my yard. It's in Woolerton Old Hall, which is another David Austin. Many times the myrrh fragrance comes out in the David Austin roses. I think there is myrrh in some other roses, but remember I said that roses, there's so many combinations of scents in roses that often you will not necessarily get just one scent. You'll get several together, and then the one that is the most predominant may not be myrrh. It may be something else.
And then there's a rose called Everest Double Fragrance, which has a different scent in the morning and in the afternoon.
And that's true of a lot of roses. They will have a different scent in the morning and the afternoon. They may have a different scent. Like I said, over the weekend, a lot of people came to me and said, "I want to smell the fragrant roses," and I, come smell Pope John Paul II. But those roses, remember I said, 1/3 to 1/2 open is when they are scented the best. And my Pope John Pauls were almost gone, almost blown. So they just, they put out all their scent of places on the petals, and they were pretty much empty. Yes.
You were listing some of the characteristics that go along with fragrant roses.
Uh-huh.
Is a fragile bloom also amongst those?
Yeah, that's what I meant by lack of substance. Yeah, the bloom, the petals tend to be thin, and the petal and the head nods sometimes, and lack of substance is definitely part of what that does. But we can live with that, because if I put one nodding head David Austin rose in a bouquet of the other roses, it scents the whole bouquet. Just as you do. I'm sure you do that yourself. When you give a bouquet away as a rose person, you don't want to give a whole bouquet of roses that doesn't have any scent. You want to at least stick one in there that has a scent. But sometimes it's when you cut it and where you place it. Because there are times when a rose will be very fragrant in the garden, and you bring it in the house and it's not, or vice versa. Sometimes you bring a rose in and you put it in by your bed, in your bedroom, and you go away and do a bunch of other stuff, and you come back in the evening and it's wafted in fragrance all over the room. So, it varies a great deal, the whole concept of scent and your nose. Yes. It's Frida Kahlo. Yeah. Frida Kahlo. Yeah. It is it's a beautiful rose, isn't it? I don't get I don't get much scent from it, but I don't get much scent from the one at my house either.
It does smell good right now.
You can get some scent from it right now, see? And maybe outside you wouldn't get very much. So, yes.
Two questions for you. One is from a novice rose grower. One of your slides characterizes scents like strong to weak, the different things like polyantha, hybrid tea. I don't know the difference between those. Some of them I do, but at some point that would be a great at least.
That's a good point. The differences in the categories of roses: hybrid tea, floribunda, polyantha, mini flora, and old garden rose. We can do a little bit of that with some of these. Kathy, tell us what some of these roses are.
The most blooms on that one is perfume breeze.
And that is
Breeze perfume.
and that is
It's a climber.
a climber.
It gets really big.
So, but it's not, it's obviously not a hybrid tea, and it must be more in the old garden
It must be
category.
more like a hybrid musk.
Yeah, and then there's some
And then
other
there's
small
Darla's
ones.
Enigma, which is my favorite rose to put a bunch of not open blooms in the bathroom, close the door, and then come back.
A hybrid tea versus hybrid musk?
Yes.
Differentiating by their smell?
No, they're different, no, they differentiate by the kind of rose they are. Hybrid musk is, okay, somebody help me,
It's a climber small rose.
yes. It's kind of, yeah, my best description of it would be that it's an old garden rose. And hybrid teas are roses that have been hybridized within the last 80 to 100 years. Yes, right, and they're very distinctively, this is a floribunda, and this is a hybrid tea. And hybrid teas often come single bloom on a cane, and floribundas often come several blooms on a cane, which why they use the word floribunda. One of the reasons that you don't see miniature, that you haven't seen a bunch of miniatures and mini floras, is that most of the time those roses aren't fragrant. It's because they're small. They just don't seem to carry much scent. I think the hybridizers just haven't figured out any way to put scent into the roses. If we just have just a second, is Ping Lim still here? Oh, he left. Oh, okay. I was going to ask him if he was doing any hybridizing of fragrant roses, because I know that he has talked about that.
Yes, he is.
Yeah, and I think that's really helpful. Tom Caruth did a lot of hybridizing of roses with scent, and Christian Bedard, who took over from Tom, has done a lot of work with scent. And we need to support and celebrate those hybridizers and the things that they do, because if we don't, we're not going to get any more roses, new roses, and we want new roses. Like, for example, this rose is so stunning, and it wasn't around 5 years ago. So it's just so exciting when the hybridizers come out with new ones that we can really enjoy.
I wanted to ask you about roses that are fragrant at nighttime.
Well-
We're new to roses, so I just wanted to ask, we know more about epiphyllum, and we have certain that bloom at night.
Right, night blooming rose. For the most part, maybe in the deep south, when you got some humidity going along with the roses, you might get some scent in the evening. But for the most part, they need at least a little bit of sun to bring the scent out of the petals. So you don't really get night blooming scent from roses.
They're not pollinated by moths.
Yes, roses are pollinated by bees, and they travel during the day. So that's part of that. So anybody else have any other questions? Well, thank you very much.